Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me here to this wonderful place. It's a great honor for me to do my first public lecture here in Macau, because so far, of course, I taught a lot of students, but take this opportunity to translate my science today to society. And there we are with the topic for today. I think a topic which is quite timely. Everyone is talking about AI at the moment, and we try to understand how it will shape societies, how it will change humans and our well-being and our being together. And I'd like to talk a bit today about how we can make progress actually in understanding this huge topic of AI in society. A bit about my background. So I'm a psychologist, and I work at the intersection of computer science, psychology, neuroscience. So I take an interdisciplinary approach. I also teamed up in the past with people from law so that we think about proper regulation of AI technology. And I try to give today a broad overview on several topics which are related here to AI in society. So let me start. As you can see, AI is everywhere in the mass media. As you can see here by my accent, I'm a German. So this is a famous German outlet, Der Spiegel, who, of course, in the year where ChatGPT was released, everyone was reporting basically about this technology, and it made, of course, world news, also in the international magazines. And here you see already how ambivalent people report about AI. Some people think it's the holy grail, it will be fantastic. Other people say it will be horrible. And we try to understand today a bit in a more nuanced approach what might happen. Could also say we distinguish at the moment between AI doomers and AI boomers. Yeah, these are on the one hand the people who are very pessimistic, on the other hand very optimistic regarding this technology. So let's start with a very simple question, namely, what is AI? And if you try to understand the impact of AI in society, of course, we have to understand what AI is. This is actually not that easy because, as you can imagine, there are a lot of definitions out there, and we're confronted with AI these days already in terms of very different products and services. And in order to grasp this a bit better, we make a very historical start here. These are the guys who basically belong to the founders of the whole AI movement. And they were all there in 1956 at the so-called Dartmouth Summer Research Project, where the first conference on artificial intelligence was happening. As you can see here, you have this, sorry, what happened? Sorry about this. The conference, they handed in 1955 a grant proposal to get this conference funded, which then actually happened in 1956. That's why you see these 2 years. And when they met and they wrote that proposal, they came up with a first definition what AI is. And I think what is really critical is what you see here. An attempt will be made to find how to make machines use language, form abstractions and concepts, solve kinds of problems now reserved for humans, and improve themselves. So in a way, we try to make a machine think, have cognitive functions. That's a bit the idea behind it, which was proposed in the middle of the 1950s. The founding fathers here of AI were very optimistic. They thought that they would achieve their goals, which they outlined here, perhaps in 10 years. They thought at the end of 60s they would have been there. Obviously, we know it took much longer, and the largest limitations in really making progress, and also seeing from history that we went through a lot of AI winters, how it's called, where no developments have been made, or no strong developments towards artificial intelligence, or even AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is today the holy grail, has to do with, on the one hand, lack of computing power, and on the other hand, of course, with the problem that massive data sets were missing. Therefore, the internet was really important, or the World Wide Web, with data which was generated there to train AI systems in a proper way. That explains why it took so long. If we speak about AI, I find it very helpful to use this metaphor by Dr. Kai-Fu Lee and also by Andrew Ngay, who talk about AI as the new electricity. Why might this be an interesting metaphor? Because just imagine, again, a society without electricity. Electricity is a general purpose technology. We wouldn't be able to fire up a smartphone. We wouldn't be able to use a fridge. These cars are operating on electricity. We need to charge the batteries and so forth. So it is a groundbreaking technology, electricity, which of course shapes society in many, many ways. And thinking about AI as a general purpose technology, which can be used in very different areas, is, I think, a helpful start to think about the complexities arising from the AI revolution. When you take a look from 1955, 1956 to the great breakthroughs, a lot of people still remember the AlphaGo momentum in 2015 when AlphaGo defeated Heer van Hooy, someone who is really capable of playing Go. And that showed already that AI, at least when it's getting a certain task, which is clearly defined, can excel, of course, humans in many ways. And I think then I don't have to mention this, that the release of ChatGPT in November 2022 was clearly one of the biggest milestones so far in AI history. Of course, accelerating also all these things which we see now happening on a daily basis. Yeah, it's very hard to keep track about how fast things are developing. Of course, here in Macau, we're in China, we see, for example, DeepSeek as a very capable large language model, and that's also what I'll talk about a bit later on. Okay, so if AI is such a blurry term, in a way, if you think about it as a general purpose technology, impacting on society in many different ways, of course the question arises, is there any way that we find a framework, an approach to really understand how AI will shape societies and also shape opinions of people towards AI? Because we all have to live with it somehow. And one way to do this is this impact framework. It's a framework which we came up with a couple of years ago, where we used impact as an acronym. It's an art word which helps you to understand which variables, which categories are important to be considered to understand how AI will shape on societies, but also explain why people form certain opinions about AI and then also actually use it. And let's go through that. It's called the interplay of modality, person, area, country, culture, and transparency variables. I'll make this at the moment very short, and we will revisit all these categories in a second. So modality is a classic term from the computer sciences, basically describing what kind of data can be processed by an AI system. And if we talk about computer vision, for example, we talk about AI systems which are able to detect patterns, for example, pictures, or are able to detect a cat in a picture. But it could be also a classic modality to process text, if we think about large language models at the moment. But I would, in the meanwhile, talk about this modality term a bit broader, because AIs, or systems, are different in their degrees of interactivity. If you think about ChatGPT or DeepSeek, you can enter a prompt and you get an output, for example, so the interaction can happen, but of course we have also one-way AI systems. Some are informational, others not. So we have to think about the modality of the AI to come out to an answer. Then, as a psychologist, of course, we will shed light on psychological characteristics of persons. Yeah? So we have to consider age, gender, education. We have to consider personality structure. I will talk about this, because there's something embedded in people which drives them in a certain way to interact with technology. Then we have to consider the area of where AI is applied. Of course, it makes a difference if you see AI applied in the education or medicine sector, for example. Then we have to consider country or culture. So with country, I mean the regulatory aspects of it, so how AI is regulated, because this also forms opinions and shapes AI systems. and we have to consider culture as a variable. And then finally, we have the transparency variable. We know that a lot of complex AI systems these days are not transparent. They're black boxes. You do a prompt and you don't understand how an AI system comes to a certain answer. And at the moment, we see a lot of efforts in the computer sciences and also in psychology to understand or to make AI systems in a way that they explain themselves. So they not only deliver, that's the idea, an output, but also explain how they came to an output. And that, of course, would result in more transparency, and that would help, of course, if the black box is getting a bit lighter, helps us to understand a bit more if the AI output is actually trustworthy. If you're interested in this, we have a follow-up paper which we just published, where, because at the same time when we came up with this framework 2 years ago, another work group came also up with a model, and in this new paper, basically we combined the models, which are quite similar in some ways, but also there are some differences, but I don't want to go into this in too much detail today. So, if you want to understand how AI is shaping society, of course, one classic approach in psychology is that we ask people about what they think about the technology. So we come up a long time before ChatGPT was released. I got interested in this field and I thought, wait, we need to come up with some measures, with some sound psychometric measures. As psychologists, we have a lot of mathematics behind task construction to come up with measures which are able to tap into AI attitudes, positive and negative AI attitudes. And we started this research in 2018-19 when we came up with the first, as you see, rather simple measure. But the interesting thing is, although it looks pretty simple, it actually can make some predictions. We know from technology acceptance model, it's a classic model from computer sciences and social sciences, that only if people form positive attitudes, they actually show an intention to use technology and then also to use it. And as a society, of course, I mean, if we have meaningful and good tools, of course, we want to people educate that they have, or at least trustworthy AI products, also positive attitude. That's what we here developed, and we asked simply people in China, but also in Germany, for example, to fill in the scale, and we gave them also a couple of products to rate. So we asked them not only about their global AI attitudes, because what is your attitude towards AI? It's a very abstract concept, but would this translate in a certain way to actually being willing to use a certain product, or having used such product if it's on the market, or be willing to interact with social robot Pepper or an Android, or go into a self-driving car, for example. And what we observe in our data, and that was quite intriguing, and we tackled here the so-called weird problem in the social sciences, talk about this in a second, that we actually see with the data, and I'll make this pretty short, that if people have a positive AI attitude, they are also more willing to use the products and more willing to trust the products. And of course, if you're fearing AI, it's exactly the other way around. Although in our data, what we observed, it is more relevant to study positive attitudes to understand if people use it, and not so much the fear attitude. So that's basically what we observed in Germany and in our Chinese data set. This said, it's really important to do these studies around the globe, and I did similar studies in Singapore. I worked also with colleagues in Qatar on this to understand this, because what we face in the social sciences is called the weird problem, that a lot of studies which have been done are basing on Western, educated, industrialized, rich and democratic samples. And then always the question is what we study, is this true for global populations, or do we have some characteristics of the samples which does not allow that we translate our findings to around the world? And therefore we did here a study with a sample from Germany and 2 locations in China. And that's a bit the perspective I always have, that we try to do data collections around the world to really understand about what can be translated to different societies. So again, that's an ugly slide, as you can see, but it should just make one point. We have at the moment a couple of questionnaire measures tapping into global AI attitudes. And we try to reduce this, because if we would do a representative study in Macau on AI attitudes, you could imagine that's pretty expensive. And if you need always 20 items to ask, which is psychometrically sound, and every psychologist would say that's the way to do it, it is very costly. And we were interested to understand what happens basically if you just roll out single items. Just the item, I have a positive attitude towards AI, as simple as it is, and I have a negative attitude towards AI. We investigated different other frameworks, and we basically see in our research that even these single items actually work in making predictions, for example, here, to predict also if people are willing to trust ChatGPT. So basically, we can do it in very, very simple ways, this AI attitude research. What else is important to know as a psychologist? I mean, we talked in the beginning about AI doomers and AI boomers. The reality is that we have a lot of people, if you take a look at the distribution of the data, who are, well, either they are neutral, or sometimes it's weird, they have super high scores on the fear dimension, but also super high scores on the acceptance dimension, because they are fascinated and fearful at the same time. And this shows you that at the moment, I think, we are talking about two factors which are a bit also independent from each other to be seen. Because if you think about positive and negative AI attitudes, you could either say it's a dimension. Someone who has a positive attitude then would need to have a lower negative attitude at the same time, or it seems to be more independent. And we see for a lot of people, actually, these constructs seem to be something different, because some people say, it's so nice, but in a way it's also creepy. And that's what we see at the moment. A lot of people don't know really what to do with it. So let's go through some variables to understand how people shape their opinions about AI and how AI is perceived. And let's dive a bit into the psychology of the topic. So first of all, in the data sets, we were of course interested to understand if we would find some robust association with age and also gender, for example. I have to say, you could, for example, accept what we see, for example, in social media addiction research, often that younger people more excessively use technology, that the younger they are, they more engage with this technology. Interestingly, with this AI attitudes, it's more complicated. So we did a lot of data collections, and we see in our data sets very different age associations. It's not as simple as we actually have observed things to be, for example, with technology use, social media, and so forth, in particular if we talk about addiction in this field. What seems to be more robust is the effect that males tend to have slightly more positive views on AI than females. That's something which is more robustly to be observed across data sets, but you can see, for example, also here in Germany, this effect is a bit larger than, for example, here than in the Chinese sample. So it depends a bit always on where you do these studies, but nevertheless, did carry out a lot of research in the field, and I would say this gender difference regarding positive AI attitudes, that's something which seems to be more robust. Interestingly, here in our data sets, and that speaks also again for the fact that it's important to investigate this independently, for the negative attitudes, we don't see so much differences. That's quite interesting. Speaks again for the fact that it's important to understand positive and negative AI attitudes as something separate. Let's dive a bit into personality psychology. We have one prominent model in the world to study human personality in a global way. And it goes back to the 1930s when psychologists did some really weird things, which are, but in a way, very logic to do it, because they said, well, we believe if we want to understand human personality, we have to study human language. Why? Because we use language in everyday life to describe ourselves. You know, who am I? We characterize other people. And the idea was, in the 1930s, two psychologists went to the Webster's dictionary and they put out every word which you can use to describe a human being. They came up with literally thousands of words which they took out. And what the observations which were done with factor analysis and correlational studies is that we tend, if we describe people, we tend to observe that certain words in the descriptions cluster on each other. For example, if you describe someone as being vivid and social, it is also more likely that this person is assertive. This made psychologists think, if you take a look at the data patterns, that there is a latent factor behind it, something which we cannot observe, the personality trait, because what we can observe is being vivid or social. But we know from the mathematics behind it that there must be a latent factor, and that would be called extraversion in this case, yeah? Something outgoing person, yeah? And that is the factor impacting upon different behaviors. If you do this kind of factorial analyses of data, language data, descriptions, you ask people to rate themselves on these adjectives, we come up more or less robustly in different cultures with this 5-factor model. So which are described as openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, should not be seen as a category, as more dimensional approach. So people tend to be more extroverted or introverted, somewhere in the direction. They tend to be more conscientious, yeah, or a bit more chaotic, for example, yeah, less diligent. Or they tend to be more extroverted or introverted, more agreeableness, or more, well, less empathic, for example. And here we have this neuroticism factor, people who are easily stressed, more anxious, worrisome, and so forth. So what we wanted to understand is, because these personality traits are shaped by genetics and the environment and complex interplay. I did a lot of studies over the years on this topic, so fascinating area, diving into the question, why I'm the person I am. We try to understand if these personality traits would shape, perhaps, what people think about AI. And what we observed here in our data is basically a little observation that neuroticism is linked to more fearing AI. Hence, in other words, people who are more worrisome, more fearful, more stressed, they also report to more fear the coming AI wave, be pessimistic about it. But if you know about statistics, you will see that the effect sizes are very small. That means here personality might have a little bit of an influence, but it's not a strong influence in shaping what people think about AI. Beyond personality, it's important, if we take a look at psychology and perhaps also in terms of educating people and making them willing to try out AI technology. One thing is a very important concept in psychology is technology self-efficacy. So if you think about self-efficacy in this area, you would say these are persons who easily would report, I have a new technology, I can master it, I can deal with it. And that's, of course, positive for your overall attitudes towards technology if you think I'm a guy or a person who's able actually to handle these things. And we know that there are some interesting psychological effects which we can use, that people reduce their fears a bit. For example, the mere exposure effect. It's a classic effect in the psychological literature saying if we are confronted with something which is at least neutral, so not negatively tainted, and we are engaging with this, can be a person, can be a thing, a machine. If we do this repeatedly, we more like it. And so in other ways, I think what we need is for some AI tools a playground, a safe playground where humans actually interact with it. They know nothing bad will happen when they check out some things, that we have a playful aspect with it. And this likely will have a positive effect on technology self-efficacy. So let's move further on. Let's go in a field which is highly interesting. It's the question how AI will shape medicine and, of course, also psychiatry at the moment. And we came up here with a work where we thought 4 years ago was published how AI will be used in the neurosciences and psychiatry. And there are different areas which we can touch. So I will talk in a second a bit longer about using large language models as AI chatbots in psychiatry. Before I do this, we do here in Macau also research on this area, mobile sensing, digital phenotyping. What we do here is basically we study phone data from people and sensor data to predict their mental health states. So a person, make this very easy, if you are, for example, if you're running in a depression, people show social withdrawal, They don't leave home anymore, so GPS signal stays at home. They don't reach out to their social network anymore. They don't call people. These are all digital footprints. And if they text something, there will be probably more negative words or negative smileys. So, and here you have cluster of data fluctuating with the state of the mind of a person, which you can tap in. And this, of course, can be used also on population level. Just think of the COVID pandemic to understand how the well-being of population is changing. Of course, if we think about using such data, we have to think about privacy concerns. You can do this kind of studies, of course, also with protecting privacy of study participants and patients. On the other hand, I think there are scenarios where it's actually really interesting and important to use this. Just let's revisit the COVID pandemic. We had globally these massive social distancing things to do. And I think for governments, it would have been very helpful to understand how such an intervention, social distancing, is impacting on well-being of persons and perhaps showing that psychiatric disorders are on the rise so that they can weigh in and say what are the costs due to psychiatric disorders rising versus the cost of, for example, social distancing or not doing social distancing. These things can be studied here in this data. Then we have the area which, of course, is already helpful now. Psychotherapy is something which is burdensome in terms also of paperwork, preparing it before and after. We have now tools, of course, as you probably also know, use in your area. If we have a talk like here today, which can be immediately scripted and so forth, this is reducing paperwork. And then we have another area where AI likely will be helpful to improve brain disorders or help treatment of patients, because we are still dealing in the field of psychiatry with psychopharmaceuticals which are really old. We have not seen a breakthrough since many, many years. So what is still used, serotonin reuptake inhibitors to treat depression and so forth, are basically very old meds which obviously are far away from the disorders, because everyone who's working in this field usually knows that it takes 2 or 3 weeks. You have to take the meds before something is happening, showing that obviously the neurochemicals are rather far away from the cause of the disorder. And the hope is that AI will help us to make progress here. Now we come to a very interesting area where AI is more surprisingly used, namely that people use large language models not to enhance themselves at work, but as an AI companion. And that could be seen as an unintended consequence of the development of these things. On the other hand, it's not so surprising, because when Joseph Weizenbaum came up with the first AI chatbot in the 1960s, there's a little story about the secretary of Joseph Weizenbaum who should have said to Joseph Weizenbaum, could you please leave the room? I need some privacy with Eliza, with the chatbot, to talk alone. So what we see is humans tend to anthropomorphize the machine. So we see the machine pretty quickly, actually, not as a machine, but rather as a human being. And therefore, it's not surprising that in the sciences at the moment, you see here, was Christmas 2025, we have the World Health Organization is speaking at the moment about the loneliness epidemic, because we have a lot of lonely people around the globe. And this is really a problem, because we know that loneliness is a driving factor of mortality. We are social beings. We are stronger in groups together. We need social networks. And therefore, we see now a rise of people using AI chatbots as a substitute of human to talk to these chatbots. And there is a really interesting research out there here, for example, showing that interactions with AI companions can reduce loneliness. These are really well carried out experiments here. But I think that this will not be a long-term solution, to be honest. Why? Because first of all, we did a new study, which we published a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks, where we investigated in China the degree to which people interact with DeepSeek as an AI companion. So we asked them about, to me, DeepSeek as a friend. I discuss my biggest secrets with DeepSeek, for example. If I interact with DeepSeek, I don't feel like I'm communicating with a machine, so seeing the human there. And as you can see here in our data, this is the histogram. We see a lot of people with here in the higher score region actually saying that's true for me. That's what I'm doing. And what was interesting now, we assessed also in the study depression of the study participants, and we asked them about their loneliness. And you can see here a slight negative tendency. So what's quite interesting to see, if we see a small negative association, which means the more lonely people are, the less they see DeepSeek as a friend. So maybe if people are lonely, they don't actually want such a machine. They want a real human being there. If nothing else is there, they use the AI chatbot, but maybe what we see here is that we actually have a longing for direct communication. And just imagine if you're lonely, what do you like to have? Do you like to have someone sending you a message via WhatsApp, all will be good? Or do you like to have a beloved person coming, taking you in the arm and say, all will be good? I think it will be the latter case. Why? Because it is more powerful. We know from the brain sciences, and it's a paper we wrote reflecting about these AI companions, which are used now to reduce loneliness, is that this kind of interaction with a machine is unimodal, which means it's basically here just text. If we interact with humans, we're talking about multimodal interaction. It is, we see the person, we feel the person. Social touch is so important. It is so important. Of course, not from a person you don't like, but a person which you like is touching you means that in the brain oxytocin will be secreted, and this reduces then, for example, stress in the brain or the sadness circuitry, so you feel better. This is not what a large language model can do. It cannot. It can trigger some cognitive thoughts, but all these effective experiences of social interaction at the moment is not possible with a large language model. Some people say, yeah, but robotics is going on with embedded AI, and here we will see machines which will be able to mimic human touch, but from my perspective, we are far away from such a social touch which can be mimicked by a machine. So from this perspective, I think it's not the real deal with the large language models. If we take a look at human nature. Okay, we want to understand the impact of AI on society. So we learned a bit about different variables to take into account. We have to understand the psychological structure of the person, how they deal with this new challenge. You have to understand what area AI will be employed. We talked a bit about the psychiatric area. We'll talk about learning in a second also. We have to consider the modality. And then, of course, we have to also understand that the rollout of AI system, what people think about it, is shaped by regulation, for example. And what's quite interesting to see is here that this UK data set, don't take it too serious because it was just a very small data set. But here what you can see is quite interesting, we replicated, is that the positive AI attitudes are way stronger in China compared to, for example, Germany. And we have the saying, the German Angst is there, yeah? German anxiety. But in a way we see it here indeed in this data set. And you don't need here to run further statistics. You see this blue bar is way larger than this one. So, and we have not observed this one time. We have this repeatedly observed this in this contrast China, Germany. I did studies in Singapore with contrasting Germany, that we also see Singapore more positive attitudes compared to the Germans. And the question is, why is this the case? And you can say, okay, it might have to do something with the psychological condition of the German citizens. Yeah, I'm a German, so maybe I'm allowed to say this, but maybe it's also something different. And what could it be? I think that's the data what I want to show you here. So for Singapore, where you see trust in AI, and trust in AI is here lower than, for example, the trust in AI in Singapore. So again, we see that these differences seem to be shaped, yeah, but by what? And we cannot answer this with these studies, but I think it has to do with different regulation approaches. And if we talk about Singapore, we talk about something really interesting. I worked at the time when this guy from the government from Singapore discussed how they will handle the situation about AI, because you could think about regulating it strongly, the technology, Or you could say something very different, which I will show you now in a second. Namely, you could say, well, maybe we have to prepare our citizens in a different way. I'm not sure if we will hear this now sufficiently, or maybe I just skip it, but you can check it out online. I just tell you what they are doing. It's really interesting. The Singapore government said, well, we're a small country. AI is here to stay, let's be honest. And AI will also be good as a driver of innovation. So what we will do is something very different, not as the Europeans do with the European AI Act. I will talk about this in a second, which obviously will shape somehow AI attitudes, because the mass media report about how AI is regulated. And in Singapore, they said, well, let's be honest, if you're 40 years or older, you usually, it's quite some time that you have seen a university from the inside. But you're still young enough to have a long work life before you. So they said we have to uplift our citizens, and we have to make them an offer to go back to university, paid, to get an AI degree. So what they offer is for all citizens being 40 years or older, go back to university, being paid for going back to uplift yourself. It's a very different strategy with AI than, for instance, what the EU is doing, for example. What you see here is a paper I did with a colleague from Tübingen, where we took a look at the AI regulation initiative in Europe. And I talked about this Artificial Intelligence Act already. And the problem with this AI Act from Europe, from my perspective, is that you have paragraphs in it which use a lot of undefined legal terms. There is a paragraph, it's called 5.1a, which speaks of banning certain subliminal techniques beyond a person's consciousness. So these should not be rolled out, causing psychological harm or harm. And then you always say, how do you want to prove this? That an AI system is subconsciously subliminal, impacting on the user? That will be a tough case, yeah, to show that it's actually happening. And if I think on the other side, if I would be an entrepreneur, say, wait a minute, I'm not sure actually what this means, and maybe they can play it against me. Maybe I do my enterprise somewhere else in the world, probably not Europe, because if they get me for this, even if I don't want to do it, I'm one of the good guys, I might face a drastic fine here. And that's the problem with terms which are not really legally defined. And that's what we see here. So that's a problem. And I think that shows you the dilemma we have. If we regulate technology too strongly, it might stifle innovation. If we are too lean, might be also not good, because then, of course, a lot of products might be rolled out which are actually harmful. And if we talk about the AI chatbots, you probably have heard that we had the last year the first death cases of people interacting with these AI systems. So I think this one case was settled now in January, where a young boy from Florida, 14 years old, interacted with a large language model with a character from Game of Thrones, and it was now debated if the large language model pushed the boy to suicide. And we have at the moment a lot of discussions going on. AI psychosis, I don't like this term too much, but has been brought up by Mustafa Süleyman, said, well, we see that some people after interacting with AI systems get delusional, for example. This, of course, can also bring moral panics. I think that's not good, because most people will not get delusional. But of course, if you have a tendency to psychotic thinking, and you interact with an AI system which is always agreeable, we talk about sycophantic AI systems, very charming, but not challenging your wrong worldviews, yeah, then you might be pushed somewhere that you say, oh, I don't need correct. The AI always says me I'm right with my thinking. Then we get a problem. Here, and therefore we have to think about smart AI systems which actually, when the worldview needs to be challenged, are capable of this. Otherwise, we have always a very agreeable AI always saying everything you say is fine. That's obviously not good. So, Then another variable of importance is the transparency variable, to understand how AI will shape our thinking and how AI will impact on society. And I told you already that one idea is that we create AI systems in the future which get out of the black box character mode, which means you prompt something, you not only get the information, the answer, but you also get an explanation for how the AI came to the output. And with this kind of study, we wanted to understand for different scenarios how much people actually want such an explanation from an AI system. So we came up with 3 different scenarios. One scenario where AI is embedded these days, of course, social media, the whole recommendation engine in social media, the personalization process are operating with AI. And we asked people, well, in these scenarios, how much would you like that you get the information about what is shown to you in the newsfeed by the, how does the AI operate behind it? Then we did another example, AI skin screening. So you can these days make a photo here from a certain mark on your skin, send it through the AI pipeline, and the AI would detect then perhaps skin cancer or whatever. So would you like to have an explanation here? Another area, AI car insurance. These days you upload some data and then the system says you have to pay the following for the policy, the AI insurance. And here is your money on the line. You want to understand how the AI came up with a certain offer they make here to you. And the data is not that surprising, but what you see is that it depends, of course, on the area, how much people want to have an explanation. In some areas, the black box seems to be more okay than in other areas. And I make it rather simple. As soon as it's about our health or money, we like to have more an explanation. Social media, lesser so. Yeah? Of course, you would see here, importance ratings here, it's more like the neutral line. Yeah? People favor explanations, but in high-stake situations, there we really want the machine to give us input why the output is as it is. Okay, and let's come to an outlook. So AI is here to stay. It is a general purpose technology. Of course, it will matter where AI is applied, and it comes to a lot of variables which you have to consider. But we're now in an area, in a time where we have to think about the rollout of these systems, and of course we have to understand will they actually help us to be more well in AI societies. And we have a classic theory in psychology, which is well known also in different fields. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where he said, well, if you make it very simple, first your physical needs have to be fulfilled. If these are fulfilled, then we think about being safe and secure. If we're safe and secure, we're thinking about fulfilling our social needs. Then what here cannot be seen as self-esteem, and then self-actualization, we lift up ourselves. I mean, that's an overtly positive view on human mankind, as we know, because Maslow was strongly influenced by studying biographies such as from Gandhi and other people who were exceptional thinkers, exceptional in uplifting themselves and actually being able to personal enhancement. But nevertheless, we think in this paper that basically AI can be rolled out to help us to move through the ladder. So we, for example, have these days AI is used to improve, for example, farming and to make more crops more resistant to heat waves. So this helps to nourish would help to nourish human mankind. We have AI systems which help to monitor public places to reduce crime, for example. We have areas here, social needs. We talked about the ambivalence with the AI chatbots, for example. So in a way, yeah, AI could help us in different areas if we roll out them in a logic and a good way, probably to uplift ourselves and come to what I talk AI well-being. It's not meant the well-being of an AI system. That's not what I mean, but I talk about well-being of humans in AI societies. And that's also what we're doing at the moment. We do a couple of research in this area. We just try to understand how can we foster AI well-being. We are back with the impact framework. We have to consider all these variables, of course not alone, but in a complex interplay to understand how will they impact upon our thinking and the rollout of technology. And I come to some last things I think we really need to consider. We of course want to roll out AI systems in a humane way, which means that we always have to consider who are we as human beings. And we have of course long evolutionary heritage in us, and this is mirrored here also by some new data where we investigated life satisfaction in the context of you being satisfied with your social interactions in the online versus the offline area. Now it sounds a bit bizarre to distinguish this because for a lot of people we reach out via both channels, but nevertheless we asked, how satisfied are you with your social interactions in the online area, and how much are you satisfied with your social interactions in the offline area? And there's a very easy message here to be told, namely that if you take a look at these data here, these columns, these are larger than these ones, which shows that the association between satisfaction with your offline interaction is more closely linked to your overall life satisfaction than the satisfaction with your online social interaction. So in other words, being happy with your offline relationships is way more important for your well-being, for your life satisfaction. But I also want to say that this cross-sectional data, we always have to be careful here with the causality or the direction of effects. But nevertheless, I think we should not forget, also in AI age, we are social beings. We have a deeply need for interacting with people, being here in this room, having the chance to interact with each other. And that's something which is critical not to be forgotten when we think about rolling out all these machines, all these AI systems in societies. The other thing which is quite interesting, it's another new study we did, it's on learning. And we asked here study participants about the learning styles, because at the moment there's always a bit the fear that people might use AI to have a shortcut. Yeah? Also in schools and education, to say, yeah, I just need a quick answer for the exam, take the quick route, use it, and we are there. So what we were interested to understand, how would different learning styles map upon AI use? And what we asked is superficial learning style. So that is, I just learn what I need for the exam. I don't go deep. The shortcut version of learning, or the deep thinkers who say, that's so interesting, I read the extra book, not just what the professor wants from me. I really want to understand it. I want to go deep down, the deep learners. And at the same time, we asked them about using AI to uplift themselves, to get better, to get more productive, faster. And the interesting thing is, superficial learning was not associated with using AI in this way. It was the deep learners who said here, in our sample in particular, we observed it in Germany and also I think in the male sample of the US sample at least. It's not no perfect replication here. But nevertheless, in the German sample in particular, we observed that the deep learners were willing to use AI to actually get more productive and better. And if this would be a trend which would hold to be true, I think that would be quite dangerous for society, because that would mean that those who have a deep learning style, they use AI, they will get even more productive, and the superficial learners, they would not really uplift themselves in a proper way, and then the gap would get larger. That would be difficult. So I think we really have to ensure that also in education, that if we come to a point to say in certain areas AI use is actually helpful, we really have to ensure that everyone profits from it, and not those people who are just self-motivated by it, to ensure that the gap is not getting wider. It's a big topic at the moment, right, in education. To what extent should we include AI in education? And I'm a bit ambivalent about it, because on the one hand, I think in the beginning of all these things, we need classic education still, because I always say to my students and everything, you have to write a lot in your life and read a lot of stuff. That's training to shape your own voice. If you just read what an AI system output is, it's like averaged. It's nothing special the AI usually comes up with. And what we want to have, we want as humans, we have to create a unique voice, a unique way of thinking This needs to be trained. And if you directly from the beginning always just start a machine, you will not train your thinking. And I also would argue that successful interaction with a large language model requires good language skills. So this is the beginning of it. If you're not good in prompting, and that requires language skills, you just get average stuff out of the machine. So in a way, this shows that I think still classic education is important, but there will come a point where we have, of course, to educate students that they understand what is a deep fake, what kind of information is shaky, and therefore, you need to build up an expertise. In my area where my expertise is, I can feel already by the output of an AI that something is not wrong, not right there, because I know the literature, we all know about these AI hallucinations, and so forth. So this requires critical thinking and not just dumb cognitive outsourcing, right? Okay. So this brings me to the end, and I have here a short summary, I think, of a 20-second screen summarizing what we discussed today.
Comprehensive approach reveals that attitudes are not only shaped by the functionality and reliability of AI systems, but also by individual demographic and psychological factors, as well as cultural and regulatory environments. By examining these influences, the framework assists policymakers and technologists in addressing public concerns and enhancing AI literacy, paving the way for informed and beneficial AI integration in society. Understanding these dimensions is essential for fostering a climate of acceptance and effective use of AI technologies. Moreover, this framework encourages ongoing dialogue and research to continuously refine our approach to AI and its societal integration.
Okay, thank you so much. That's the end, and then I hope that we have the chance to interact with each other now, in person. I have no time what the clock is, but I think, yeah, was okay. Yeah, a lot of information. I don't bite, so, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. So, congratulations, really interesting, and raises a lot of new levels, at least for someone that is not that deep in the area. My is this AI on a personal basis came from something that you really don't know, then something that fascinates you. Although I'm not using AI as I think I'm not using, probably I'm using more than I realize. It's like a common thing that is happening. But the issue is this: you also start to realize from what you learn, from what you read or see, that AI sometimes induces you in error. Yeah. So it's something that sometimes you realize that there's an error, like you just mentioned by the end of your talk, and sometimes you don't even realize that. Right. The danger that I see that may happen is that this will make you towards society. Of course, we are already in a society of post-truth that we need to live with that, but it may also leads us to a rejection of the AI because you think that everything is fake, like you see lots of fake things in other social media. But can it be considered as a danger? Because you need to have additional knowledge to accept it, or realizing to accept it that may be right or may be wrong. How can you deal with that on a usually use of AI in your daily life or research or whatever?
Yeah, you're absolutely right about one thing. So in many often we are not aware anymore that we are acting with AI tools because we don't expect it to play a role, or even if we know it, as with social media, many people don't think that always an AI is operating there, because in the way they get information from people, yeah. But of course, that it's sorted out by an AI, what they show you is nothing people reflect on a daily basis, and that makes things more complicated, also research-wise. But I think the more interesting aspect is, of course, what happens to a society if you don't believe anything at all anymore. And then, of course, we might have a tendency to also not see the truth anymore, even if it's presented to us, because we simply say, it's, as you said, post-factual society, yeah, where everything is just fake news. And of course, we see in the US, of course, if you have a president who's always lying, then yeah, you start, of course, not to expect anymore that things might be actually factful happening there. That's a big problem. That's a big problem. And I fear that just teaching AI literacy or media literacy, what is always said also in these discussions, when should students start or children start with social media and all these discussions which we have at the moment, that media literacy alone will not be sufficient. Why? Because what we see, for example, from a related area where we did research on your knowledge about how to protect your identity online, so privacy literacy, is that just knowing about how to protect yourself does not mean that you actually always change your password and so forth. So knowing and actually behaving in a certain way are just weakly related to each other. That does not mean that we should not invest more in education. Of course we should, but that will not be sufficient. And then we come, I think, back to this thorny regulation part, that we need, of course, a certain amount, that's my perspective, we need a certain amount of regulation safeguarding users. And what we see, of course, is that these legal cases now in the US, where a judge or juries have to decide now about these thorny questions if a large language model is responsible for the suicide of a person, that this, of course, results in changes of the AI products, because the industry is responding to this, because they fear about the business case and say we have to make these platforms, of course, more secure. So this shows you how regulation can make actually the products better in terms of safety. But again, and that's also very critical, it has again unintended consequences. Because what happened, for example, we talked about psychophancy AI this year in my talk. This very charming, agreeing AI, always saying, oh, you're such a nice person, and you're great, and you're so right with all your thinking. There have been version updates from platforms such as Replica or Character AI, if I remember correctly, and they made the AI system a bit less sycophantic, a bit less charming, a bit colder. And there were quite interesting articles that a lot of users say, I want my old AI back. I don't like this. I don't like this machine. Actually, some people fall in love with these AI chatbots. The version update changed the personality of the AI. It is not the AI system. They were going back to the companies. Please, please, please give me the old version back. That's where we are. And they see that also changing a software product, being embedded in society, has very different consequences. But in a way, regulation will be part of it. I think media literacy, regulation, all these things have somehow to work together to make these experiences more safe. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It's a fascinating topic. And as an educator, I'd like to ask you whether you have come across, already done any research, comparative one, in regard to deep learning and superficial learning, according to regions or demographics. Because I think, well, I also teach, and sometimes more recently, of course, we come across sometimes big contradictions between what the student is in the classroom and what that student is able to produce in the written paper, something like that. So I'd like to ask this question.
That's a super interesting question. You have seen a bit, I'm a data science guy, so I always like to see the data behind it. And the paper we did with deep learning and surface learning is just out now. I think our work is the first one in the world actually bring these variables together. So we have basically no knowledge about this so far. And of course, that would be very interesting to know who's more prone to use AI in different ways and so forth. And it's a very young research field because, of course, if you take a look, the computer scientists were mostly, of course, interested in making progress in terms of reaching artificial intelligence. Now the holy grail is reaching AGI, artificial general intelligence. But understanding that these software products, that robots with embedded AI, that they're interwoven with the social fabric, that is something which is just gaining traction now at the moment to understand its impact. But your research question is great. I hope we have some data on this really soon, because this also would help to take a look at the classrooms. Whom do we need to support a bit more to make the best out of their potential?
Thank you for your speech. Isn't it more a problem of natural intelligence than artificial intelligence, the way we deal with that tool? Because it's not the first time that humans invented something important and changed the way we live currently. So if I feel that the tool is too nice for me, the problem is in me, not in the tool.
Yeah.
If humans lie as well, it is a saying that if you repeat a lie too many times, it becomes a truth. So can you comment about this?
Yeah, in a way, I mean, human intelligence, of course, plays a role here, how we deal with these things, but you probably have seen that it's not just intelligence, because humans actually bond with these machines. We have a strong emotional facet, which we have to take into account. It's emotion and cognition, which we have to consider here to understand how we actually deal with these things. Then we come to the second aspect. Often we are not aware of the fact that we are actually interacting with AI systems. So because it's so embedded and happening on a certain level, which we're not aware of. And I think a good example is how we use the smartphones these days. Yeah, I mean, usually what's enough is us being alone, that we already have the phone in our hands. It is a very learned, automated behavior which we don't reflect anymore. And then the habit formation is so strong that no matter how intelligent we are, we simply don't reflect about these things anymore, because the technology has been designed in a way that, again, just us being alone is the cue, which is enough to have already the phone in the hand, because the industry is operating with attention economy and surveillance capitalism, as we say, leading to A/B testing of platforms and make them particularly convenient to use things. So, and then I think we have a third area which you have to consider. In a way, I think human societies face a bit what also happened when Darwin came up with the theory of evolution, because this was making humans smaller, because we were confronted with the idea that we are not some special species, but that, well, we share the same ancestors with apes and so forth. And then now, in a way, we have a same moment, because we are facing actually machines which are smarter than us. So it's the next blow against human mankind, because we are not special anymore, because we created systems which are better than us in many areas at least. But we should not forget that these machines are still also very stupid in many areas. So if we think what a child can learn very quickly, just to grab a coffee or to see that's a cat, that the machine learns to distinguish a cat from a dog on a picture means a lot of training, so much data. We say the machine is not that intelligent, because a child will do this immediately like this. So we have certain problems where humans are still superior, also in terms of speed of learning, and other areas which are rather complex, like the Go game and so forth, where the machine completely excels us. And it's interesting that these highly complex cognitive functions, there the machine is better. If you talk about motoric skills, being agent in an environment, we see that things are different. There we're still good. It's interesting that also Jan LeCun, one of the godfathers of AI, alongside Geoffrey Hinton. I mean, these guys, Geoffrey Hinton is the AI doomer, where I would rather say Jan LeCun from Meta, chief AI engineer, or former, I think he's out from Meta now, but he's more optimistic about things. And so even these experts with this high knowledge, they have very different views on what AI will do in the future. And why have I mentioned Jan LeCun? Because Jan LeCun is this guy who's completely abandoning the field of large language models at the moment. He said there's a dead end. We will not reach AGI in the sense of an artificial general intelligence, which means an AI system which is superior in all domains of human life. We are a large language model. Yeah? So he goes another direction.
Are you yourself more of a AI boomer or a doomer?
That's a very good question. I mean, I think usually I'm an optimistic guy because if we take a look at the history of human mankind, we have repeatedly seen that with every technology which was introduced, people tend to react with moral panics. It was the same as the radio was invented, electricity, if we think about the first comic books which came out, TV, computer games, and so forth. We always see a certain kind of reaction of society towards these things, and then we have seen in the past usually that we come to a point that we get along with this technology and we master it. So humans also have a tendency to worry about the future and bad things happening, which often will not happen. And if they happen, we are quite good in dealing with things which we underestimate before. So I think in a way, we should be not too pessimistic about it, but taking, of course, real danger scenarios, take them serious. And for example, one real danger scenario has been put forward by Mustafa Süleman, who wrote this book, The Coming Wave. And he talks about a construct which is called AI pessimism aversion. And he talks about that this is a predominant thinking among tech elites, which always say, because they want to sell products, oh, AI will be fantastic, all will be great. And they completely downplay the risks. And there are some risks. So for example, one major risk at the moment, which is discussed, is the fusion of biotechnology with AI. Because we have, for example, in the field of genetics, we have the gene scissor. So we can manipulate these days the genome and pretty easily. And we can create new life forms now. And just imagine that you fuse now AI with this technology. How easily will it be? It just needs to be one person in the backyard, in the garage, creating the next COVID virus. Just one person. And then we have a big problem. And these are not unrealistic scenarios. And here we see that there are some scenarios which we really have to consider in terms of regulation, in terms of safeguarding. And I think, therefore, I try to have a nuanced view on this. I think AI is fascinating in many areas, but there are some real dangers out there which we have to consider.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It's very, very interesting. Especially the part where you were speaking about those who have a very strong positive opinion also have a very strong negative opinion. In a way, I feel that because I'm a software engineer.
Yeah.
And I've been very curious about AI field, and I've been trying to keep up with the incredible opportunities that this technology opens. But in a way, I'm very optimistic with what I can do, because sometimes I don't have enough time. I have a lot of ideas, and I want to do a lot of things, and the tool augments my productivity.
Absolutely.
And I can do incredible things in very short time, and I can learn a lot. But on the other hand, I feel that I'm not able to keep up with the pace. I'm feeling that I'm being left behind. It means every week there's something new coming up, and on one side it gives me hope, but on the other side it creates anxiety, and it also makes me wonder where are we heading, you know, as humankind.
Yeah.
When the mobile phone and the computers they appeared, the mentality was these are things that were created to serve us, but in a sense we're not the masters. These are the masters now. You know, you go anywhere, you sometimes you even go to a restaurant and you see two boyfriend and girlfriend having dinner, and they're not speaking with each other. They're just swiping the mobile phone. So where are we heading with this? Are we but on the other hand, we need to face AI. Shouldn't we invest in schooling, going on teaching, and like that guy from Singapore?
Yeah.
I remember in 2017, so 9 years ago, I went to a exposition in Singapore about IoT, Internet of Things.
Yeah.
And I met the Minister for Digital Development, which at the time I was like, wow, they have a Minister for Digital Development. They're very far way ahead.
Right.
But should we learn? Should everybody have mandatory AI classes? But on the other hand, I feel like we need to invest in philosophy and language and social dealing, because really these things are making us like cavemen, you know, separated, distant from others, even though I'm in touch with somebody from the other part of the world.
Yeah.
Now this is what worries me the most. Where are we heading? What should we do?
Of course, I don't have these answers. I think you gave already a good answer. It will likely be a combination. I hope it became a bit clear that my view is that we definitely have to invest in offline communities again. So we should not just follow the narratives of the industry. They want to sell a lot of products. And of course, we should improve AI systems which are more safe and which actually serve us. But of course, you see this now with the business cases. OpenAI, all the stakeholders behind it, they want to see some return for the money. So what they think about now is a bit like the social media times, that they roll out personalization ads in the chatbots and so forth, and then you get a feeling of history repeats itself. And we had in Europe long discussions about, for example, our social media, where you did a lot of research. Shouldn't this be in the hand of a public product, so not in the hands of industry? Because if you come to the point that certain products are so important, for example, for communication or for uplifting people, then the question is, should there be actually a business case behind it, or should we have a public good here? So, and then of course that would dramatically impact on how these systems will be designed, because if you think about social media where AI is embedded, it would be radically different. It would not foster engagement with the platform or prolonging online time or getting more data from the people, but it would be a different platform because it would not be economically driven. So I think we have to think about different business cases here. That will be also part of the answer to come up with more humane products in the end, which are better for society. And of course, if you foster engagement with an AI chatbot, I think we have seen with social media where this is going. So and therefore, I think we have to make the step back, and I think that's also what I heard from you. We have to understand who we are. We are deeply social creatures. What's good for us, is what I presented, is to be happy with our offline experiences. And that's where we should invest more. And this technology will come and it will serve us good if we roll it out in a proper way. But I also believe that classic philosophy and having good language skills is still something which should be part of a good education. It's for sure something which we'll need. And not just the AI course, which will be also important, but Of course, first we have to have the classic skill sets, I would say, to master technology in a proper way, right? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. So that was really nice. Thank you so much for you all for the great conversation. It's a thorny topic.
Fascinating.
But